Hi, Troy here. I want to start a new series. As you can see, the title Pokemon Tier History. I want to go over, just the past competitive aspect of Pokemon, like what Pokemon might have been good back then, and how it's changed over time. And I want to start off with the most popular tier, the most popular just usage generalization of the whole game would be the OU tier. It's regarded by many as the main go-to of what people play off of. If you ask people they want to play, and people first thing will say what kind of Pokemon, they might say OU tier only, and most of us will immediately know what that means, which I find really cool. Smogon, we all know them. I won't be taking sides of whether or not they're great and the best or how I don't like them. I'm just gonna just go over the facts of how they came to be and just what they've done and what they've accomplished. So if we start back in 2004, so it's about after a year after Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, a guy by the name of Chaos. He was the site owner. He created the website. He wanted to create a community where he could create a kind of metagame for Pokemon. Kind of hard to believe back then because people playing the game back then, they knew it was luck based and you could use whatever you wanted, and just the game was just running rampant like that. So I'd have to assume he created Smogon after some maybe bad experiences, who knows. But some of his fellow colleagues, friends, whatever you want to say, they've been around the competitive system of Pokemon since back as 1999. They were on many websites such as GameFAQs, RPG Gamer, things like those, and just other random websites you might have found these people. And they've just evolved from just a small group of guys coming up with the ideas to where they are today. But back then, the one of the first things they started on was they want to come up with metagames, and one way to do that was to come up with tiers. And the first tier I would have to assume they came up with was the OU tier, which was the tier people would be like, okay, what's the tier everyone's using today? Well, you know, what Pokemon's being used back then in, say, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. It's like, well, you always saw the Heracross, Salamence, Flygon, Skarmory, Fortress. You still saw Gengar and Starmie. But we can go further back. Even in Gen 1, there was a competitive scene. That was, Gengar, Zapdos, Snorlax, and Starmie. Those guys were the big four Pokemon back then. And one day I will go over later of those individually. Um, so as we move into Gen 1, what made Gen 1 so popular? Pretty much just, the Pokemon with the best moves. Abilities really weren't it all back then. Items not so much either, but whatever had really good moves and I guess the typing either, but there really wasn't a lot of mixtures in typing either. Gen 1 was um really, I guess you would have to say, a little easier to play with. I might be, jumping a bit too much there, but it felt easier. Now we move into Gen 2, a lot more Pokemon come in, obviously, more Pokemon got made in that gen. And so the same thing with Gen 2 happened as Gen 1, just better Pokemon, whatever was better moves, and I guess you could say stats. Really wasn't popular EV training yet. But then when you move on to Gen 3, that's when we start talking about EV training, better abilities, better Pokemon made to stop other Pokemon from past gens. So then we move on to things like that. Back in Gen 3 and 4 as a whole, Pokemon with certain roles, those started to become just known. People would be like, "Oh, what do you run today?" "Oh, I'm running a Rest Talk Tank Torkoal." It's like back then, Gen 1, you'd be like, "Wait, what's a that or what's a this?" So these roles are coming to play. That's where the terms physical sweepers, special sweepers, toxic stallers, toxic tanks, mixed special sweepers. Okay, we get it, man. These Pokemon are special, and other Pokemon can fit other roles. I will refer to Skarmory a lot. He was your Spikes Stealth Rock setup guy. He was your Toxic Staller. He was your Whirlwind guy. He could be your tank. He could be your mixed tank, physical tank. Not so much value. So you could see what Gen 4 3 were like. And Gen 4, a lot of Pokemon getting different and new abilities, like Caesar, for instance. They just burst on the scene because of one ability they get, and boom, they're just out there. And so Gen 5, as we move on to Gen 5, uh, the hidden abilities. Now, this is where everything just comes into play here. This is when pretty much anything was like OU back then because a lot of Pokemon were getting good abilities, like Dragonite to name a few. No one really thought about using Dragonite. I guess in Gen 1, Gen 2, you could see using Dragonite, but then Gen 3 and 4, Garchomp, Salamence, those were better options. But once you saw Dragonite get multi-scale, like that was just huge. That was huge for him and Pokemon as a whole. Now just so many opportunities just opened up. So you see him getting some usage. Other Pokemon dropped off in this tier list like Zapdos. He wasn't OU in Black and White tier in Black. Yeah, Zapdos wasn't OU in that tier. So that's something crazy to think about. Even though Zapdos was just relevant from the first 4 gens, now in Gen 5 just gone. It's crazy to think about that. Pokemon like Thundurus, Landorus, I guess pseudo legendaries, Pokemon like those, they're the genies, whatever you want to call them. Those guys were, had the best abilities, best stats, and great typing. So, of course, those are going to get used a lot. And that's the main thing here is just usage. That is what all this talk is about, is just what Pokemon are being used and you know, just how much they were just getting used and how easy it were to use. As we end on, I would say just Gen 6, it's the same as Gen 5 is when Pokemon got new abilities, they just, being used. So same thing when Mega Evolutions. Gardevoir wasn't really being used all much. So what they do, they gave it a new item, and it gave it a better ability, better stats. Mawile, better ability, better stats. So we all know, because this has been happening recently, but as you can see, every gen, the game completely changes. Who knows what's going to happen when Gen 7 comes out? More Pokemon are going to come in. Maybe other Pokemon that are from the past gens get a new Mega Stone, a new ability. We don't know. So it's crazy when we think about it. But the overall, to me, is just how it's based on how you can create a metagame off a game off of luck, endless possibilities. And you can still just really just condense everything to be like, yeah, these Pokemon are fair. This is all fair, and fair is the word. And it's crazy when you think about that because their vision, Smogon's vision was, yeah, we're gonna put Pokemon here, and then we're also gonna come up with these special rules called clauses. I saved this for last because the clauses were really crazy because people broke the game. Endless battle clause. You could make the game go on forever, like Recycle Magnemite. As that's something really funny if you want to ever think about that. And the sleep clause, you can't really put your whole Pokemon team to sleep, but back then people did before that clause was even thought of. But now the clauses have become so just talked about. It's like if you don't follow that clause, they won't even battle you, and you won't even get battle a lot of people because of those clauses. And where are those clauses in? They're in the tiers that Smogon created. So it was a really creative process that Smogon came up with. They're like, okay, we're gonna come up with tiers. The Pokemon are being used. We're gonna come up with tournaments, and here are the rules. Simple as that. If you don't buy them, and then hey, you can't play. And a lot of people like that. They like the way they saw it. They must have felt the same way. And then here we are. We see Showdown. That is pretty much the main way to play. There's tournaments on Showdown, and you can easily make whatever Pokemon you want, whatever ability you want to do, or they're allowed to get, and then just play OU. And then everyone's playing OU right now, and whoever's top of OU, they're like the best, Smogon trainer at the time. There are other tiers I won't get to, but I feel like OU was a good starting point because then we can just talk about what Pokemon go from OU to, let's say, UU and U, or just above UU, which would be Ubers. But other than that, I'll wrap things up. I really want to thank you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this, found this somewhat, interesting. Hope you guys learned a bit. I'll be bringing more of these episodes more frequently. Mention whatever you want in the comments section down below. Keep the discussion going. Hopefully, no arguments. Hard to wish. But so next time you guys ever think about the Pokemon that are being used, just think about how many times they were used back then.